one of the things that I've been noticing lately is people, they narrate a particular thing and they say, so this is why our madhab is the best. So they use a particular argument.
Mhm.
Now, saying this, has there ever been any statement like this that the Scholars said, okay, this madhab is the best because all madhabs are truth and they're prophesied?
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. When we talk about, you'll find scholars that will say the preferred position is this, which is what we are upon. So they'll have their preference. This is the preferred position. Or what we understand to be was-sahihu hada, and the sahih, the authentic position is this. Right. But you don't find in the books of fiqh or other things where people will say, this is correct to the exclusion of all others.
Mm.
This is the correct way, or this is the best way outside of all others. Right? This is the best. No, they'll say this is the preferred. And ufaddilu, I prefer this, or this is the preferred methodology, or ana amilu ilay, I adhere to, or I incline towards, or I take this position.
Mhm.
Because if you say something is the best to the exclusion of all others, that means it's duty bound for everyone who is not doing that thing to follow that given thing. And many people that have this exclusivist attitude towards fiqh and madhabs, they would be very surprised if they did a real reading of history
Mm.
about how the imams of the past were, and also how they were when they dealt with people that transgressed the bounds in fanaticism, how they were. When people started disparaging, because the Abbasids had taken on the Hanafi school for transmission and used them as their qadis.
Mm.
And in response to that, the Hanafis wound up becoming Mu'tazila for 5 centuries, to the degree that they were associated with that
No.
in the Muslim West. In the Muslim East, it was different because Imam Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, rahimahullah, he had carried the banner for Ahlus-Sunnah in the Muslim East. But in the Muslim West, so going from Baghdad and forward, from Baghdad into North Africa and Andalus, they were generally associated with the I'tizal, being Mu'tazila. And so some slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the laity would disparage the Hanafi method,
Mm.
just in general. And this triggered Imam Ibn Mabrid, who dies 909 Hijri. He's a Hanbali Imam. He wrote a book in praise and deference of Imam Abu Hanifa, to respect the Imam, to show the
Oh.
respect for him and his madhab. That's not his school, but to show respect for it and to show righteousness, to call people away from disparaging it when the issue wasn't to do with the madhab itself being defective, but to do with a group of them that became Mu'tazila for that period of time. The same thing happened when he wrote his book, Al-A'immatul Arba'a, which is a book on the four Imams. It's one of the earliest books where you're just cataloging the lives of the four Imams. And he put them in historical order. He didn't put Imam Ahmed first. You know, you would think, oh, he's going
Mm.
to put Imam Ahmed first because that's the Imam of the school. He didn't do that. He put them in historical order. So the
Mhm.
order that they showed up in history, so 150 Hijri, then 179 for Imam Malik, then 205 or 204 from Shafi'i, then 241 for Imam Ahmed. This is the historical order. But each one of them, he gave them their riwayat, where they came from. And the biographies, the pagination is generally close in terms of the amount of attention he gave to each one. So it's not the case that the biography of Imam Ahmed is like 300 pages, but then the biography of Imam Abu Hanifa is like 10. Like, no, it's
Mhm.
generally comparable. The biographies in terms of the page number, the amount of detail, where he was born, the scholarship. There's a such thing as being balanced, having iqtisad, having balance in affairs is one of the most important things that a believer can have, especially with regards to fiqh, because the ummah, the vast size of the ummah, you cannot, unless you shut yourself off and you live a very isolated existence, like a self-imposed isolated existence, you are going to meet people in the ummah with difference of opinion. There's just no escape.
None.
There's no escape. Like if I take my family, for instance, those of us that are in the Sa'id in Egypt are overwhelmingly Malikis. But those of us that are in the Gulf are Hanabila. But we've never had an issue of who's better, who's worse, who's Jahil, who's not.
Yes.
But now someone could say, well, that's easy because the Malikis and Hanabila share a lot of the usul in common. So it's easier. Maybe. But that being the case, you can find families of where there are, in Palestine, where there are Shafi'is and Hanbalis, where the usul are not as close. And they don't have these ta'assub-based arguments and battles where people start getting kicked out of their homes, or they say, well, we're better than you, and they start disparaging people and saying you should just join the winning team, and they use these type of nonsense things. Like those things, we often quote those things like as a way of sort of joshing with people and laughing at them, because we don't take that seriously. But there are slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who really take it seriously when they say those things. Like those are things that we would laugh at you in Mahad for, like, holding, because it's just silly, because we're in Bulugh al-Maram class, which is, this is by Imam Hajj Al-Asqalani, who's a Shafi'i. We're in Bulugh al-Maram or Umdat al-Ahkam or Muntaqa. We're in these durus and having to cover these different opinions. So we don't have any time for the nonsense. The teachers that we have are from the different schools, so we're not living in that world of, oh, we can only be with so and so, we can only be around so and so, or so and so is this to the detriment of so and so, and he should join the winning team. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. And we don't live in that world.
And some of them, when they use this argument, looking at numbers. Now, looking at numbers, obviously, when we look at the countries, the amount of believers, Malikiya, Shafi'iyya, Hanafiya, they're very large countries, right? They have a lot of followers. And some people use this, oh, my madhab has the largest following. We have so many followers, so it is the best. And using numbers, but then also claiming prior volume leaders, sultans, and khilafah, saying, oh, they were also of our madhab, so it must be by evidence that this is the best.
Yes, and these are really serious problems. When you do this, it's a really serious problem, because you have to take the rough with the smooth. If you say the Abbasids and the Ottomans were all this, oh, okay, well, let's talk about them. And then we start talking about how the Abbasids, for the 5 Khulafa, were Mu'tazila. We start talking about the Abbasids, how they destroyed the grave of Imam al-Hussein. We start talking about the Abbasids, how they didn't send Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi and the Imams that were fighting along with him. They didn't send him troops to battle the Crusaders. Or the Ottomans, who were engaged in a 600-year slave trade with Slavs. Or the fact that they were engaged in castration, because they thought it made better soldiers, and they had to guard these massive amounts of women that they'd taken in battles and things like this. Right? You have to take the rough with the smooth. You can't live in that world. It's like, you do know that, the Abbasid poisoned Imam Abu Hanifa, that Imam Ahmad was in jail, that Imam Shafi'i was a fugitive, that Imam Malik had to put his own shoulders back in the socket without anesthetic because he'd been pulled out of the sockets. Like, all these things, the last 20 years of Imam Malik's life, according to some chroniclers, is he stayed at home and he rarely came out to go to the masjid because he was under surveillance and other issues. Like, you have to take the rough with the smooth.
Yes.
You can't have like a one-size-fits-all attitude of, oh, well, these people were this, therefore that means mine is true over all others. Well, that technically doesn't mean that, because if we adopt this type of attitude, the richest man in recorded history was a Muslim. He was worth, if you adjust for inflation, 700 billion pounds. This was better known as Mansa Musa from Takruri. Does that mean that the Maliki madhab is therefore the superior because he was accidentally damaging economies by giving out so much sadaqah that it was actually devaluing currencies and countries he was going to? And so the Sultan in Mecca pleaded with him, and he asked him, he advised him, could you please not give as much sadaqah because of the damage that it's causing. When you do this, it's undermining our dirhams and everything else. Did Mansa Musa say, well, no, I'm not going to do that at all. Let everyone join the Maliki madhhab. Maliki for me, Maliki for you. No. He went through areas when he was going across North Africa on foot, and he reaches Sham because Ibn Kathir met him. Other Imams met him. Right? He didn't tell Ibn Kathir, and what is stopping you from joining the Maliki madhhab? No. He didn't do that in the Gulf. Why are you Hanabila so stubborn on your madhhab? No, he didn't do this. He carried on, and he received visits from many different dignitaries from different madhabs. And he received them with good cheer, and he gave them sadaqah, he gave them gifts, he did other things. People were able to stay balanced. When Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi takes over Egypt after wresting it from the hands of the Fatimiyya, the thing that he did is he set up a waqf for all 4 schools. Now, he only knew because of how he grew up and what he learned. The Shafi'i madhab is what he knew. So he put most of his energy into that because that's what he knew.
Exactly.
But he set up waqf for all 4. And we have to remember, he met Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani and received blessing from him. He met Shaykh al-Yunayni and got blessing from him. He had other imams in his army. Muwaffiq ibn Qudama was in his army. So was Abu Umar al-Maqdisi, was 53. Muwaffiq ibn Qudama was 43. Ibn al-Imad was there. Bahauddin al-Maqdisi was there. Because the Khalifa wasn't sending any troops as backup. So that was the only source where we could muster that many people in a short period of time that were mujahids. That was the quickest choice that he had, was the Hanbalis. Now, did they differ in some branches? Of course they did. But that was not the thing that figured prominently in history. What figured prominently in history was that Ahlus-Sunnah came together and handled what they needed to handle. That's what figured prominently. Because truth be told, the Abbasids were not the people that you wanted assistance from in the Crusaders. The Mamluks and others, when the last of the Crusades was petering out, the Mamluks and Ayyubids, they didn't get help from the Abbasids against them. They had to sort of go it alone. The same thing for the Muslims of Andalus, when the Spanish Inquisition and the Abbasids didn't help them. They didn't help them at all. The same thing, or what about how the Ottomans wound up selling off Baytul Mal? That wasn't theirs to sell. Or undermining other things, or where they tried to undermine the system in Egypt, the fiqh system in Egypt, and by trying to undermine it there, it caused an economic crash and crop failure. I mean, if we start saying to the exclusion of anyone else because these people were that is the truth of it, we have to take the rough with the smooth and look at everything. And when we look at everything, you might not like what you see. So the best option is to exercise iqtisad. And when you exercise iqtisad, everyone understands they have their preferences. Alhamdulillah. There's no blame in this. People, I prefer this because Bahauddin Shah Naqshband and so-and-so imams, they're fantastic imams, and I love the way they explain the usul. I love the way they teach fiqh, and that's the direction I've gone in. Okay, alhamdulillah. Right? But at the same time, you're able to appreciate Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. You can appreciate Mansa Musa. You can appreciate you can appreciate Al-Khalil. You can appreciate others. You can do so without the attitude that you're in some sort of exclusive club. If you consider, when you go through usul, Maraqi al-Saud, this text is written by a Maliki, Shaykh al-Alawi al-Shanqiti, but we memorize this. It's written by a Maliki. And at the end of that usul text, he says that you should not allow ta'assub to affect you. And he gives a listing of different imams, like Ibn Daqiq al-Eid al-Kabir, the elder Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, how he was Shafi'i and he became Maliki. How Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari was Hanafi and became Shafi'i. How Amidi was Hanbali and he became Shafi'i at the end of his life. He gives these examples to show that the madhabs are not exclusive clubs
Oh.
where this is my mafia group, this is the crime family I belong to, and that's the end of it. No, Ibn Daqiq al-Eid was Shafi'i, then became Maliki. This person was Hanbali, then he became Shafi'i. Al-Amidi, Sayfuddin al-Amidi was Hanbali, then he became Shafi'i. Muhammad al-Amin al-Shanqiti, who dies 1393, he was Maliki, but he became Hanbali. Right? These things, they don't take away from someone's rank. Right? Al-Bukhit, Bukhit al-Muti'i, he came from a Maliki background because he's from the Sa'id, but he became a Hanafi. He became a Hanafi. These things don't undermine someone's knowledge. Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, this great Imam, rahimahullah, he was Shafi'i in the beginning of his affair. And his teacher was Abu Ibrahim al-Muzani, one of the top students of Imam Shafi'i. But he wound up becoming Hanafi. And that's okay. Ibn Khuqir, who originally he wrote the Sharh, he wrote a Mukhtasar on the Muntaha. Some of his family were Hanafis from the Hind, from deep within India. They became Hanbalis. The family became Hanbalis. Okay. You know, it doesn't take anything away from you. Haven't betrayed the deen. You haven't disrespected Islam. You haven't undermined all of our ancestors were this. And this. How do you know all of your ancestors were that? How do you know that? How do you know all of your ancestors were that? If you said most of us were that, that's probably more truthful. But when you say all of our ancestors, how do you know all of your ancestors were that? If you do a real deep dive in history, you find a lot that, like, Afghanistan at one point was Shafi'i.
Oh.
They were Shafi'i. A lot of the big imams, the big Afghani imams, like a lot of it, like the western facing side, that was all Shafi'is. Al-Khattabi's Afghani, Imam al-Ghazali's Afghani, Jalaluddin al-Rumi, who's Hanafi now, he's Afghani. But Jalaluddin al-Rumi, some of his family, you go back and they were Shafi'is. Then they became Hanafis because they were impressed by what they saw of the religious character of the Seljuks and the later Ottomans. That impressed them. They became Hanafis. Sri Lanka was Maliki, Shafi'i. Now it's Shafi'i.
Oh.
And they don't remember because when Ibn Battuta went there, he became their Qadi for a period of time.
Wow.
Because they were Malikis during his trip in Battuta. But now if you ask them, there's no one of recent memory that remembers them being Maliki. They don't remember. But they're Shafi'is now.
Mm.
But it doesn't take anything. What, are they less Muslim now?
No,
because
exactly.
they're less Muslim now because they're that. No, it doesn't affect anything. It's not a proof that the Hanafi madhab is no good, that they've never had a footprint in the Gulf. It's just never a place that the Hanafi madhab has been set up. In the UAE, Arabia, there are some there, but most of the people there are either expats. There's a small oasis in like Ahsa that has Hanafis. But that doesn't mean that the Hanafi madhab doesn't have any intrinsic value. You have to look at the history of they were expelled from the Haram a couple of times, but that's because of the Abbasids and the Ottomans. It's not because the Hanafi madhab, it's because the Qudat that they sent, there were issues which were actually issues of Ta'assub, which is why they were kicked out. It's precisely because of the issues of Ta'assub.
So some of the Ottoman muftis or qadis that was sent, they were also told to persuade the people towards the madhab or force the madhab on others.
Yes, to try to force it. So when they came to Egypt, they what they did is they deposed Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Sa'di, who wrote Al-Jawhar al-Muhassal. They deposed him and all the chief qadis in Egypt in order to try to impose the Ottoman qadis, and so the people, so even fellow Hanafis were deposed because they said, no, we want our particular Ottoman muftis to be in, our Seljuk ones to be in power. Or when they sent letters to the Gulf, some of the imams in the Gulf, that said, you need to mention us in every khutbah, and you need to establish the salah times according to what we've established. Well, we're not doing that. We're establishing it because sometimes we'll mention you, but sometimes we won't. We don't have to. It's not a sunnah. Sometimes we will, sometimes it won't. right? The fitan that was caused by some imams, like, and Abu Ishaq al-Shatibi, rahimahullah, who died 790 Hijri, the big Maliki imam, in his book Al-I'tisam, that book is a book regarding innovation, and he does class ta'assub as a type of bid'ah.
Subhanallah.
He classes a type of bid'ah, and what he quotes is a big imam of the past, Abdul Rahman ibn Battah, and he was a traveling imam. He was a missionary for Islam and a traveling faqih. And he said, everywhere I went, when the people of ta'assub would find me, they would start classifying me as things. So if I began to discuss the ayat and I said we should leave the ayat as they are and not do further commentary on them, they would say, "Oh, you're just a Hanbali then." He said, but then when I would discuss other ayat on fiqh or other things and said the ta'wil of it could be this, he said, so you become Ash'ari now, have you? Then when I discussed other things, he said, wherever I went, he said, when I found people of ta'assub, they would look to classify me as something. And then after that long story that was mentioned, Abu Ishaq al-Shatibi rahimahullah said, and we find that today, wala hawla wala quwwata illa billah. And he went to discuss examples of how ta'assub is dangerous. And one of them was, he said, someone came here from far away and they gave a khutbah. And they insisted that when you're giving your khutbah, at the end, you have to mention the four khulafa, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. You have to mention them in your khutbah at the end. And we said, why? He said, because this is what we do where I'm from and it must be done. He said, it doesn't have to be done. But that's how some of the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how they act where it causes this ta'assub. And whenever you see that ta'assub, the ulama never, ever look at it as a good thing. It's always seen as madhhab, and it's always soundly negated. This is one of the things that was held against Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani by Imam Ibn Jawzi rahimahullah wa rada, was his ta'assub to the Hanbali school, to the point that he would make people change schools when they came, he'd make them change schools. Right? So when he was met by Sheikh Shirazi, who's not the Shirazi we know of 47 Hijri, another Shirazi, and Abu Medyan, they met him at Mina, and he made them change madhhab. So that Shirazi, he went from Shafi'i to Hanbali, and Abu Medyan, he went from Maliki to Hanbali. He made them change.
Subhanallah.
Right? Now that's madhmum. Because, and Ibn al-Jawzi, he pointed this out, he said this is madhmum. And his hostility towards a lot of the scholars of his time because of his insistence. But Imam al-Jawzi, rahimahullah, walked that middle line of iqtisad. And his grandson was Hanafi. Even though he came from a Hanbali family, his grandson was Hanafi. Ibn Aqil had Hanafis in his family. Right? So it's just the idea that these are run sort of, that madhabs are sort of these gangs that we're part of, or sort of these mafia clubs that we have to join when we find big imams in history have become another madhab for whatever preference that they decided, and they did that. And that no one disparaged them and say, oh, you can't do that. No one said to him, Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, you can't do that. What are you doing? No one said to Ibn Khukir, oh, why did you leave the truce? No one said that to them. This is something they decided, and they were respected for that.
Who was this recent sheikh that he sent all of his children to all 4 different madhabs? I don't know if it was Imam Sa'adi.
Yes, this is Abdul Rahman al-Sa'ati al-Banna. This is the big muhaddith. He's one of the few people to have done a sharh on the Musnad of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. This big Egyptian sheikh, he was so happy that Allah gave him 4 boys and 4 girls. He said, I will have each one of them follow one of the 4 schools. So each of the 4 sons followed one of the 4 schools. And the one that followed the Hanafi school was Hasan al-Banna, who is the mu'assis. He's the mu'assis of Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the original one, which was sound. He wrote his Majmu' al-Rasail. There's nothing in there that's blameworthy or anything. But that one was the one that was Hanafi, and then Ahmed was Hanbali, and then the other 2 were from the other 2 schools. And then the daughters, they all became from different schools, and they each became specialists in whatever that field was. The same thing with the Al-Attar family. In general, most of the Al-Attar are Shafi'is, but there have been some that are Hanbalis. There have been some. Right? But it doesn't take away what? That removes something from the Attar family? No, it doesn't take anything. Or the Tabbakh family. Many of them are Hanabila, but there are some Tabbakh that are Shafi'is. but it doesn't take anything away from them being that. And no one says, oh, you're not upon the truth. I mean, the first Shafi'is in Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani's family, the first Shafi'i after him it was about 200 years before you had someone in his family that was Shafi'i or what have you. It's like 200-300 years down the line, right? But that doesn't mean that they're less Muslim, right? These people are upright. My issue with a lot of people claiming Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani was knowing how he was about his tariqah and his ta'assub in that. I want to know where these people are getting from that he made them murshid or whatever else. That's my hostility towards fake qadis, because I know they're fake and I know what they're doing is fake. So that's my hostility. But people being from one madhhab or changing from one to another, it doesn't remove the bridle of Islam from around your neck, or it doesn't mean you have less taqwa, or that the other madhhab was defective. It has nothing to do. The other madhhab is still just as righteous as it was, whether you're in it or outside of it, or even before you came to know about it. It still remains as it was. Imam Muhammad Amin al-Shanqiti going from Maliki to Hanbali didn't take anything away from the greatness of the Malikis of Mauritania. They're still big imams, big judges. One of my teachers is Maliki from Mauritania. It doesn't take anything away from any given madhhab that someone went from one to another. So what? So all the time that Al-Muti'i was Maliki, he wasn't upon the truth. Then he became Hanafi and finally he discovered the truth. Or did Ibn Daqiq al-Eid al-Kabir, was he upon falsehood and darkness? And then when he got to the Maliki madhhab, okay, now he's on truth. Or Al-Amidi, when he was Hanbali and then he became Shafi'i, did he discover the truth suddenly? Like when did these people, like when did they finally reach the truth? No, people had their preferences. If someone had that preference, it's not taken away from them. And the difference between the partisan people we see here and those people that change, they actually learned that school.
Exactly. Yes,
they actually learned. They not only became students and all, they became like fuqaha and qadis. They actually learned that school. And even though, now this is an important point to keep in mind as well. Even though Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, he had that ta'assub, he was still one of the only two people in history that could give fatwa in all four schools because he mastered their usul. Him and Mahfoud al-Kalwadani. Even with that fanaticism, so he still had that. He could tell you, well, your witr is going to look like this, or your witr should be like that, or you should do this. So he had mastered their usul and everything else. It's different because people will sometimes say that today, oh, so-and-so knows all four schools. No, he doesn't. He has access to their books. There's a difference between having access to the books and where you've mastered and memorized so much of the ahadith, and then you've also mastered the usul of that school. So you can do istikhraj of fatawa in that school without even having to look at their books. That's the difference when we say so-and-so is a master. Today, when people say it, there's a level of dishonesty because what they mean is, I can go to a Rawd al-Murbi'a and quote you what al-Bahuti said. That's not mastery. That's, you've got a good library. That's not mastery where, oh, I quoted Abu Bakr al-Jassas. And a lot of times when people are quoting the schools and they say they're mastered, they don't even know the Mu'tamid books. So there's that issue as well. So, we have to be balanced and reasonable and understand that there's a difference between the majority of an area being a madhhab, and that's what they know. So the majority of the Gulf is Hanbali. That's what they know. That's what they know. And that's what they're established on. The same thing, Mauritania, they're established on the Maliki madhhab, and that's what they know. They might not have even seen the hay'ah, like the postures of salah or whatever else, from another madhhab. It's what they know, and that's what they know. But that has nothing to do with them thinking, oh, well, only this is correct. Well, no. What they've seen, they say, this is what we know, and that's what's correct. Now, when they do know about the other four imams, and when it's introduced to this, oh yeah, we know about that, we just never saw that. So if someone sees you doing qabd in a fard salah, they might go to correct you. Not because they don't think the other four imams are true, but they've not seen any other hay'ah for the salah. So they try to correct it to stop it because, but they see you reciting another than Qalun and Warsh. This is where he's making mistakes in the salah. Just the same thing as when I went on Hajj. There were a lot of times with the Hanabila in the Gulf were correcting brothers I went with that had come from England. Because most of them are South Asians, Hanafis, brothers are being corrected for making group dua and Jama'ah after Farz. They're making inkar on, which from one standpoint is the correct thing for them to do, because they don't know any different. But once they saw there was a different, oh, okay, so these brothers, okay, subhanAllah, okay, now we know. But they're slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here that they know that there's 4 schools, they know, and they still disparaged it, even though they know it's different. If you didn't know, you don't know. My grandfather had knowledge that he had, and he knew that there were the other 4, but his principle was his principle, and that's what he knew. But if he found out, oh yeah, the other schools do this, oh okay, that's fine, alhamdulillah. But he has his principle, so that's all he knows to go by. So when we come together, when there's people from the Gulf and the Sa'id that come together, people, alhamdulillah, they learn from each other, but no one ever did inkar to the degree where they actually think someone is lesser than. They just found out, oh, subhanAllah, we were wondering why you were doing that. Right? These are the issues that, people have to get over. There's a difference between someone in Mauritania or someone in the Gulf or someone in a majority or someone that's come from Malaysia or Indonesia or the Philippines, where it's just it's heavily based on the Shafi'i school. So when they run across someone that doesn't do qunut in Fajr, they're like, I wonder why he didn't do that. Now for them, that can be an issue, especially for the ones that come from the Shafi'is that come from Mindanao and Malaysia and Indonesia. They will do sujood sahwi because it's so emphasized them doing it. It's an important part. So they might do sujood sahwi. But this is a fiqh issue. It's not because it's invalid. It's just a fiqh issue that, hey, we missed the qunut of Fajr.
No.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Now what people should do in that standpoint, because one of the imams was asked about this, Abdullah Sufyan al-Qudumi, and others besides were asked about it because they're in the Gulf, they're in these regions that are heavily weighted towards the Hanabila. What do you do when you have Shafi'is that are there that are worried? He said, then what you do is you make the longer du'as for coming up from Rafa' min al-Ruku'. You make the longer du'as. Right? Sami Allahu liman hamida rabbana wa lakal hamd mil'a as-samawati min al-ardi min al-mashriqi min shay'in ba'd. Or you use the other dua. There's another dua that's like seven lines long. You make the longer one in Fajr. So that way they can do their qunut.
Right, mashallah.
Right? That's called including people. So you look after people's needs, you try to make sure that their affairs are resolved, so that you try not to make problems for other people. We were always told by our teachers that if you go to a place that's heavily weighted towards one madhhab, that you try not to be in a situation where you being in leadership could cause problems. So when I was in a big community of Afghanis, the part of Afghanistan where they came from, they didn't raise their finger at all in tashahhud. At all. So when I went there, they saw me the first time, and I didn't know this. They saw me because I came in, I thought they must have finished their tashahhud. They're getting ready to make taslim. It's like, no, they were in the first tashahhud. They just don't raise their finger at all.
No.
Which is a position from Mullah Ali Qadi and other imams in the Hanafi school. So afterward, a man came to me and said, you're not from here, are you? And we spoke and everything else. So after that, I made it a point to be near the back or to be at the end of the saf or whatever else. Why? To just not make it an issue where the elders or other people, I made it an issue not to do this, to be in positions to where my being there could cause greater problem. So I respected house rules. And people have to make sure to respect house rules, as long as it's not something that nullifies. I'm not going to do something where I'm going to leave something or nullify or go against Sunnah or whatever else, but I'll be in the back. The masjid that I go to now, they're majority Maliki. So I'll try to go in because I already recite in Qalun and they're happy with that. But if I'm ever put in a position, I try to go near the back and to make sure that the first choice that they have as imam is the one that leads. I'll only lead if no one's like, the Ratib imam is not there, his naib isn't there, right? Because I do 2 taslims. Most of them don't. They do 1 taslim, right? I pray with qabl. This doesn't nullify salah, but they're used to people doing sadl, right? I have a long pause in the beginning. They're used to, most of the Maliki scholars, they say that right after you make the first takbir, Allahu
No.
Akbar, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil
Hmm.
Alamin. They don't do the thana
Yes.
or ta'awudh and basmala. Many of them. It's not, I don't know
Hmm.
if it's the Mu'tamid, but many of them, they don't.
Hmm.
So, but I make sure that I'm only there as a backup if no one else can be there. Why? To respect house rules, to respect what they do, because these are brothers that are coming from that hub of Western Africa that is majority Maliki. They know the other schools, but they have their preference, how they like things to be done. So I try not to disrupt that, or I try not to be in
Mm.
the way
MashaAllah.
unless there is no option. And people, they have to respect house rules. Same thing with people who are in the Gulf. They need to respect house rules. So when people are in the Masjid al-Haram or the Masjid al-Nabawi or the UAE, these places, they should respect house rules regarding the Hanabi and the Malikis and just blend in. If Asr is made at that time, a lot of the Hanafi scholars have made Asr as single shadow time. They should just do that. Because that's how are you gonna just leave praying in the most sacred place on earth because of that issue, especially when there's an ikhtilaf in your own school as well that mentions that single shadow is an option. So then just follow that then.
Hmm.
Just do it. Because you have to follow house rules, but don't make yourself a spectacle. So if you're gonna do dua in Jama'ah after Fard Salah, try to be discreet about it. Try to be discreet. If you're gonna do it, be discreet. Right? When the Jum'ah finishes, you want to do your Ratiba after the Jum'ah, you shouldn't do it in the masjid. Be discreet and go. The place where I'm at, that I use as my local, right when the imam makes the tasneem, if they don't sit for a little while making azkar, we immediately disperse. We immediately leave. Why? Because that's the amal of the Malikis and the Hanabila. That's the amal.
Mm.
And people have had to get used to that, to respect house rules. Pray them at home. Every now and then you get the one that decides to pray them there, but they kind of look at them like, what's this guy doing? Respect it. Respect house rules. If you're insistent that you're going to pray him in the masjid, then be discreet. Be discreet. Just like in parts of the UK, if I go where I know that some Hanafi imams, they don't like it if you establish another salah in Jama'ah after the imam has already established it. So let's say you and I go to a masjid. There's 30 of us. We're on a journey for whatever reason. We show up, we've missed the Fard Salah. So we decide to pray in Jama'ah as travelers, the Fard Salah. Some of the Hanafi sheikhs, they dislike that because the Fard Salah has already been established.
Right.
So if I go to a location and I know that it's like that, we don't do it, we pray individually.
Mm.
To do what? To respect house rules.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they tell us. We were about to pray individually. They said, are you all you brothers together? They said, yeah, we're all together. And they said, it's okay. You can all pray in Jama'ah. Our imam, he's fine with it. Are you sure? Because there's a lot of us. There's like 15 of us. Are you sure? Yes, we're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Alhamdulillah.
Yes.
So we all
Mashallah.
gather together and pray in Jama'ah. So just learn to get along
Yes,
with people,
exactly.
learn to work with people, learn to respect house rules. If you can't respect house rules or be discreet, if you can't be discreet and you can't respect house rules, you probably shouldn't travel to other places in the Ummah. Because your presence there will be a greater fitna.
Mm.
And in fact, you might not be eligible to be among those who study the deen. Because
Mm.
when you go to study the deen, if you go to Egypt, if you go to other places, Egypt is one of the 4 countries that has all 4 madhhabs. You're going to see people doing things. Some of your teachers will be from different madhhabs. That's just a fact. You think all my teachers were Hanabila? They weren't. My teachers were from different schools. They weren't all that. The teachers that I did Bulugh al-Maram with, Umdat al-Ahkam and Al-Muntaqa, they weren't all Hanabila.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't. They were different. They were different schools. What we learned, different kutub that we learned. Right? The Usul book, the Al-Alawi al-Shanqiti of Maraqi al-Saud, that's a Maliki that wrote that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those are things, yeah, we did Old Another, but we also did that for Hifz, right? Those are things that you do. If you have a thing where everything can only be from one madhab, all things have to be from this, and I don't know about taking from so and so another. Okay, well, taking ilm, it might not be for you. Just learn the bare minimum to look after you and your family, and that's it. Because being a student of knowledge, you won't be able to function. What, you're going to go study in Syria? You're going to find issues if you study in Syria.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to study in Egypt? You're going to find issues. You study in Sudan, you're going to find issues. You study in Yemen, you're going to find issues. Right? A lot of these places you go to, well, I'm going to study in Mauritania. Okay, well, you do know they're majority Maliki, and this is the thing they do.
Mhm.
And they don't do Mawlid like how you do it out here in Dar al-Kufr. They don't do it like that.
Like group fikr.
Yeah, they don't have tariqah.
No.
They don't have tariqah either. And sometimes like Sheikh Adoud's like hostile to tariqah. Rahimahullah, he was hostile to it. Sheikh Muhammad Hassan Shanqiti, he really doesn't like tariqah. Right? So it's like, what are you going to do when you go to these places to study? Because how are you going to study with these? How will you study with them? If you have a position where we're only going to follow this, we're only going to be like this, we're only going to function this capacity. If you were like this, Ibn Daqiq al-Eid couldn't have taken from Taqi ibn Taymiyyah. Taqi ibn Taymiyyah sat in the durus of Imam An-Nawawi when he was 10 years old. Now, Taqi ibn Subki, he tried to hide it, but he learned Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawood, and the Musnad from Ibn al-Qayyim. That's the fact. You can say it's Ibn Zafil instead of Shamsuddin Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr al-Zur'i. Okay, fine. But we all know who Ibn Zafil is. Or if you hide your isnad, okay, so where'd you study it from? That's an issue of ta'assub, though. That was an issue of ta'assub where, and this happened where one of the big imams of Hanabila, he met him and he was there with some of the Shafi'is and Taqi Subki looked, he said, oh, when I saw you from a distance, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure whether you were Jews or not. And Shaykh Yunaini said, well, when I saw you, I was sure that you were Muslims. And he went away. فَنَدِبَ السُّبْكِي عَنْ ذَلِكَ. And Subki, he felt bad about what he said.
Whoa.
He felt bad about what he said. See, this is why you don't follow the people of ta'assub and think you don't follow that. You don't follow that stuff. That stuff is dangerous. And because of that, there was an incident where, and Imam Ibn Kathir, big Shafi'i Ash'ari, he quotes this incident, not Hanabila. He quotes an incident where because of Subki's ta'assub, it almost caused Damascus to fall into a civil battle because the Malikis were there and the Hanabila were there, and a Hanbali Sheikh was brought in to broker a settlement between them because of some stuff that happened, because of some things that Subki did. But now people will quote as-Subki's statements in ta'assub as if they're the standard. But those are actually things that imams in the time did inkar on, including the Ash'ari and Shafi'is that did inkar on him for causing those problems. And people don't talk about why Subki moved to Egypt. Why did he move to Egypt? They don't talk about it because the ta'assub was really serious and it caused a lot of fitan. These are things that people will take those quotes and it's like, okay, well, do you have the rest of the quote or from other historians or chroniclers? Because Ibn Kathir, who Shafi'i and Ash'ari mentioned this, Safadi mentioned it as well. These are both Ash'aris, they're both Shafi'is, but they both did inkar on these things, and the inkar that was done in the time period as well. It almost caused a civil war in Damascus, the fitna it caused. You come into a gathering and call the majority, you call people of the Salihiyya district, you say that they're Jews? You know the fitna that caused? People went for their swords. You seen how big the Salihiyya district is, how big Jami' Hanabila is? And some of them, now this is the interesting part, some of the Malikis went for their swords as well. Why? They're not Hanbalis. Yeah, but they said those are our brothers in Islam. You can't do that. But that's takfir. So the Malikis, they went for their swords as well. They could have said, oh, well, that's nothing to do with us. No, they went for their swords. So they had to bring in that Hamid to sit down and broker an arrangement. And the laity went to defend as well. So it caused fitna with the laity, the scholar, all this stuff. So there had to be a majlis to iron this out. These are the things that are dangerous things, that some students of knowledge will find these isolated statements and quote that like that's the standard of how you're meant to be. But they won't quote all the other things, not realizing that Ibn Kathir, Ibn al-Qayyim, and Taqi ibn Taymiyyah are all buried in the same maqbara Sufiya, within close proximity to each other. Not realizing that Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi and Imam al-Buti are buried not far from Ibn al-Qayyim.
Mhm.
Not knowing that Imam al-Buti taught, he taught the I'lam Waqi'in. He taught that kitab. But these are things that's like people, they don't live in a real reality. They become fanatical
Mhm.
about things. What's Imam Buti doing teaching the hikam of Ibn Ata'Allah al-Asqalani? What's he doing that for? He's Maliki. Why is the Shaykh Shafi? What's he teaching that book for? What is ilm only constricted to one madhhab?
Mhm.
He can't teach the hikam of a Maliki. He can't teach that.
And
Or Muhammad al-Nafs al-Zakiyya al-Kitani, who comes from the great family of the Kitanis. He's teaching Nihayat al-Mubtadi'in.
mhm.
He can't teach that. So he can't teach that kitab that's come down to us, that all scholars agree, who was written by
Mhm.
Imam Ibn Hamdan, who died 695 Hijrah, rahimahullah, that book's a classic in the i'tiqad. He can't teach that.
Mhm.
Well, has he sat with the people? Well, listen, one of his ancestors, Abdul Hayy al-Kitani, he was the foremost traveling companion of Abdullah Sufyan al-Qudubi. Well, did that take away from his taqwa as a Maliki? Because he was with
Mhm.
Imam Abdullah Sufyan al-Qudumi, rahimahullah. Did it take away from Imam Abdullah Sufyan al-Qudumi the fact that he was with a Maliki? Like, did it take something away from them? No. Or the fact that I went through a Jami al-Saghir. Well, why'd you go through a Jami al-Saghir for? Imam Suyuti, Shafi'i. What's that got to do with the studying of hadith?
Exactly.
Well, why do you go through the Hanbali ones? Because they weren't being taught. The circles were at different times.
Mhm.
But if it's the same information, or I'm getting the same details, the study of
Mhm.
hadith, other than if you study, say, usul of fiqh, that's where you'll get differences of opinion. But
Mhm.
studying ilm and hadith, you're going to get most of the same information. So if I do the Bayquniya, or if I do Shashi, or if I do, what is it going to hurt me if I do it? If the teacher's qualified, it's not going to harm me. If I study the tafsir of Ibn al-Jawzi, Abu Bakr al-Jassas, unless it's talking about ahkam, because ahkam, obviously, per madhhab, the ahkam will be slightly different. But if I'm studying the tafsir where it's not an ahkam tafsir, what is it going to hurt me to study it? It's not going to hurt me to study it. What will it harm me if I read the Sharh Sahih Muslim, if I read Sahih Muslim by Sharh An-Nawawi? How will it harm me? Imam An-Nawawi tells you when he's, oh, well, this is the position of the Shafi'i
Yes.
scholars. But what's it going to hurt me, him doing Jarh and Ta'dil? Did it hurt him when he learned Muslim, Bukhari, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Majah,
Mhm.
Nasa'i? Did it hurt him when he learned that from Shamsuddin al-Qudama, who died 682 Hijri? Did it hurt that he learned that from him? That he's in the isnad, and that he, when he gives his isnad in his sharh on the Sahih al-Muslim, he gives his isnad to Shamsuddin
Mhm.
al-Qudama. Did that hurt him that he did that? No, it didn't hurt anything at all. It didn't take away from his hifz of hadith or anything. So just people's attitudes on like how they study, on how they learn.
Yes.
It's a really serious sickness. It's a real disease.
And Sheikh, one of the proofs that really destroys this whole argument, the things that you've been mentioning, is when you specifically look at the Ulum al-Shar'iyya curriculums. So all of the ulum, for example, when you just look at Ilm al-Hadith Diraya, it's majority or most of them are Shafi'is, like Al-Bayquni, Ibn Hajar Al-Asqalani, Imam Shahrazuri, Suyuti, Sakhawi. But then you look at other curriculums, for example, you look at the Ihsan curriculums, that's also Shafi'is, Hanbalis. So it varies, like the curriculum is the greatest proof, right, that you study from all four madhabs within the curriculums.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt you to take it away. Now, if someone said, well, what if I wanted to do just a total madhab specific curriculum that only had the Hanbali books in each of the 18? Yeah, you could. You could. But would it hurt you if you went and studied from the other? Would it hurt you? No, it's not going to hurt you. If you just said, I'm just going to look at Lugha from, I'm going to memorize Hanbali Metin and Lugha from just Hanbali Sheikhs, you could. But would it hurt you if you went to the Alfiyah? Would it hurt you? If you used, does it hurt anybody to look at the Ajurumiyah or to look at Shanqiti's, the one we did the one from Shanqiti, Ibn al-Ab, we did his one. Like, did that hurt us learning it? It didn't hurt us. Because the information we share in common, it's not going to hurt anything. It doesn't, I don't have sleepless nights where I roll over and I'm wondering, oh, why did I, does that mean the Maliki method is true? And I don't have like sleepless nights. about these things.
Mhm.
Because in the areas where we all share in common, and there's certain books that the ulama and that the ummah have settled upon because they preferred those books because they might have
Yes,
had advantages over certain other
exactly.
books. And
Yes.
it's not that the other books weren't good. It's just people settled upon them and they were commented upon more than
No.
other books. And because they were commented upon so much and so much tahqiq was done upon
Mm.
them, one of the things that people have to learn about the ummah and the scholars as well, because both they do the same, they both do the same thing. The books that are reliable, that are the dependent upon books in the ummah, are the ones that the ummah has looked upon and done the most tahqiq on, because they've gone through those books, and any rare opinions, they've stated them as such. If there are any mistakes or any akhta, any ijtihadi akhta, they've fleshed them out. So the ummah and the scholars give preference to these books over books that have not gone through as vigorous a process as that, because the ummah has gone through them over and over again.
No.
So in whatever madhhab it is, right, the books that are dependent upon are the books that have gone through that vigorous testing. And the same thing goes with in other sciences, lugha. The books that are the most dependent upon are the books that have been subjected to that checking, commentaries, hashia, tahqiq, the muhaqqiqeen have gone through it. Those are the books that the ummah has settled upon because the level of checking has been gone through it. And those books with that level of checking tend to be more preferred than the books that haven't. Not because the other books are riddled with mistakes, but because those books have been so gone through to where when there are strange statements or unusual statements or statements that you might have to have extra tabayyun on that, extra clarification on that statement, well, it's already been hashed out and gone through. Whereas the other books, if they've not been gone through, like if somebody said, oh, well, I'm going to go through the Hanbali fiqh curriculum, and for usul, I'm going to, instead of going through the Tahrir or Rawdat al-Nadir or Al-Bulbul al-Mukhtasar al-Rawda, instead of that, I'm going to use Al-Wadih by Ibn Aqil. Now, could you do
Mm.
that? If a sheikh taught you that, would the sheikh be responsible for teaching that? He would, but it might take you longer to master the usul of the school or to get a good foothold in it because there are no shuruh on Al-Wadih. So you'll probably have to study other books alongside of it because it hasn't had a commentary done on it, and that book's been around for 1,000 years and hasn't had commentary and notes, and there may be specific things that Ibn Aqil said that might be arcane, that have to be fleshed out or whatever else that you don't have in shuruh or ta'liqat. Now, if your sheikh does it for you, that's fine. But generally, the sheikhs in usul or
Mm.
whatever field, they're going to give you the books that have had consistent commentaries on
Yes.
them over and over again, or books that have other things on them, or books that have been memorized repeatedly because they're easy to find commentaries, hawashi, and things like this, super commentaries, footnotes. You can find these things that help inform your understanding of the kitab. Any more than if somebody said, well, if I went through the Nazm of Al-Umari, would that fulfill my fiqh needs? Well, it could, but really it's taken you longer to deal with that than if you did the Zad or the Dalil.
Mhm.
Like, why would you not? Like, why would you do that? Well, I just felt like, because he's from the Salihiyah, we use some barakah. Okay, well, listen, if you want to do that for the barakah, that's fine to memorize it for the barakah, but do this one because this one's gone through so many different commentaries and so many different notes, and it's been subjected and had so many muhaqqiqeen examine and go over it. Just go over this one. Do that one for the hifz, that's fine, but go over this one. So that's why sometimes you'll find kutub established no matter what madhhab they're from, the Bayquniya and other kutub, that they've settled upon those ones because they've subjected it to so much tahqiq.
Yes.
They subjected it to so many shuruh, right? That's why they've done it, so that it fleshes out the understanding of those kutub.
Mhm.
But if someone says, I'm just going to make a Shafi'i madhhab specific thing for all the 18 signs, you could do that. You could. And would it harm you? Well, no. But it might take you longer to get to the bottom line of certain
Yeah.
ulum because there's no shuruh or hawashi on
Yes.
some of the books you're studying.
Exactly.
So now it takes you more time, and you might spend more time with your teacher having to ask more questions because you've not gone through it. Now, if a teacher is willing to do that, or that's how he's learned it, or he wants to do that, then you can. It's not impermissible, but it's going to take you longer to get a foothold in those fields.
Or you need to really seek out the shuyukh in different countries that are teaching those books specifically, because you don't always have them in an institute.
That's it. You might not have them. So, and then you also have to balance out where, and this is something that some slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala don't always consider, you have to balance out different halaqat at different times. So the halaqa, when I wanted to go to the durus in Imam al-Tirmidhi's Jami'ah, that was conflicting with my ones in Umdat al-Ahkam. I can't make it to that one.
No.
I can't make it to that one. So I have to do that one another time. Okay, well, this dars in Safwat al-Tafasir, that's conflicting with Adwa al-Bayan another time. So I can't go to that one. So now you have to make a choice. Are you going to stop going to Adwa al-Bayan and start that one? Are you going to go to Safwat al-Tafasir? No, you can't do both because the times they're conflicting at. And you can't go to the Sheikh and ask him, Sheikh, can you move your class? Well, he's got 30 students that are already there that are happy. The Safwat al-Tafasir class, they've got 35 students in that class.
No.
And they're all established on that time. This is what we're doing. We're here from 5:30 to 7:30. We're here. You don't have a right to come in there. They're going through a 3-volume text. You don't have a right to come in there and start dictating terms that no. So sometimes you're not able to do a particular kitab because either the dars conflicts or that book is being taught. So people will fly. They'll go to other locations. There's people that will fly to Afghanistan, even during this time, to listen to the Mu'jam of Imam al-Tabarani. They'll go and listen to the Mu'jam, the Saghir, the Kabir, and the Awsat.
Wow. Mashallah.
And the highest Senate right now in it is a woman in Afghanistan. She's got the highest Senate. She's an older lady. She's got a higher Senate. So they'll go there and just sit and just listen to it be done. Now, if you say, I'm only going to do the books that were written in Hadith by the Hanbali scholars, could you do that? I mean, you could. But you'd have to do a lot of flying around. Okay, I'm going to go to listen to the Musnad. Now I'm going to go to Afghanistan and listen to the Mu'jam, the Kabir, the Saghir, and the Awsat. It's like, okay, you could do it. But do you need to do it like that, though? And how much time do you have? And how far do you want to take it? How far do you want to take it where I'm just going to do? I mean, you could. It doesn't harm it. But that would it take away from you doing a Jami al-Saghir instead of Daddy Me? So instead of a Daddy Me, you do a Jami al-Saghir. Does that hurt you? Well, no. If you do Bulugh al-Maram, does it hurt you if you didn't do that? You did Muntaqa. I'm Hanbali, the books of Ahkam, Muntaqa, Umdat al-Ahkam, the Kubra and the Sughra, but I've also done Bulugh al-Maram. I've also done Jami al-Saghir. It hasn't hurt me at all. And it hasn't made me, he's doubting the Hanbali school. No, it hasn't caused any of that stuff. In fact, a lot of that stuff has kind of confirmed positions I already had and made me double down on my preferences. So it's not gonna, it doesn't hurt someone to have this. And you'll find the people in Dar al-Kufr that has these ta'assub things, it often hurts them with respect to trying to progress in their ilm in other areas, because they will only accept ilm if it's coming from this source.
Exactly.
And it hurts them. It hurts them.